Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm thrilled to be here with you guys this afternoon. I hope that things are going great for you. I hope you're getting a lot of things done and that you're staying gritty. I want to go right into this podcast. So first things first, the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on the X Factor EDU network, hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph and the Tribe. You can also find it on Spotify and on all of my social media outlets. Please help us to spread the word. We're trying to expand our reach however wide we can go. With that said, I do want to also encourage you, whenever you get a chance, to check me out on social media. Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. YouTube is India White 123. And TikTok is Dr. India White. Also, check out the website, www.india-white.com, for books, blogs, and to schedule me for your next speaking or coaching event. I would be honored to join you guys on your platforms. Speaking of that, I have a couple of wonderful opportunities. Thank you to all of those involved in getting me on these different platforms for various causes. I'm here with all of you guys in education. So first things first, I'll be speaking at the FAMT conference. I think it's like November 13th. I'll be a keynote at a South Carolina's conference coming up. Go South Carolina. Can't wait to see you guys also at NABC conference. I'm looking forward to speaking with some wonderful leaders nationwide in the, principal superintendent space. Also, I'll be speaking at the Making Math Moments virtual conference, also later on this November. So if you can catch me at those, please catch me. Let's mingle. Let's make it happen. Looking forward to meeting you guys. Also, please check out the Grit Mini Workshop when you get a chance on the Grassroots Workshop website. They have a lot of great content on there. Grit is on there as well. So with that said, I do now want to transition and just remind you of this podcast. So if you are trying to close the achievement gap, but you're having classroom management issues or your students just aren't motivated to do the work, then join me on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast and we'll work out some things together. I also want to remind you I am taking students at the Grit Academy. Thank you to all of those that have been so supportive of these different endeavors. So with that said, I do want to talk today in this podcast about building a culture of grit. Again, building a culture of grit. I will be talking about this throughout because I think it's just so important. I was able to have the opportunity to go to British Columbia, Iowa, and New Hampshire, where I was able to conduct various trainings on grit and, other things. But what I found was that I think people are starting to get the idea that grit does work. And yes, it is backed by research. We've had Dr. Angela Duckworth tell us that grit is simply having the passion and perseverance to obtain long-term goals. And I told you, grit is having great resilience in time. It's all about resilience. And it's all about how to find a path towards resilience. I've told you guys before, with grit, I've modeled for you a weekly demonstration of grit. You can start with growth mindset Monday, resilience Tuesday, self-efficacy Wednesday, time management Thursdays, and then Fridays can be like your day to celebrate. Then you can reflect and, go from there. So it's all about grit. It's not going to stop. It's all about grit and perseverance. So we're going to talk a little bit about the culture of grit. And I want to first start us out by, I want to talk about some tips for building a culture of grit. So I wanted to tell you this from my heart and from my research and personal experience as to how I can help you. And then we're going to hear from a student and then we're going to look at some things together. Okay. So first things first, tips for building a culture of grit. First off, check the mindset. So if you're whatever your organization, school, whatever, business, check the mindset of the leaders. If there is a plethora of people that have like a fixed mindset and it's just always been that way, it's going to be more difficult to build grit. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. Just know that you're going to have barriers in the way. For instance, even in schools, we know that some schools do have, they are still operating in systems that can be detrimental to marginalized students. And they have certain things that have been established since like the 1930s that they just don't want to get rid of. And we've found that some of these practices are harmful, not only inequitable, but harmful. And they affect everyone, not just, various subgroups of students. everyone. And the way that we can move past those things is by having resilience in a culture of grit. However, there has to be conversations with people in the community, parents, leaders, teachers, whatever, to move forward. Because if not, you're going to be spinning your wheels trying to be gritty, and you're going to see that there are roadblocks up. Another thing is checking, the environment. Is your environment one that really is a healthy environment that cultivates grit, that builds grit, that gives everyone an equal opportunity? If there are these unnecessarily roadblocks up, whether it's stemmed from economical reasons or concepts around hate, concepts around just different limitations, invisible ceilings and things like that, then you got to check your environment. You can only do so much. But if the environment is conducive for you, then I would say plow through it, one day at a time, and build grit. 3, find your grit tribe. If your grit tribe, if you're like, okay, who is my grit tribe? Your grit tribe are your people that they always have your back and they always believe in you no matter what. You could be a trendsetter here trying to do this new work. And as long as you have a tribe of people, not everybody is going to be in your tribe. Studies show that, in a room full of 10 people, one person automatically will not like you no matter what. So stop trying to get everybody to be your best friend. The thing is, you have a goal, you have a specific assignment. Stay focused on that assignment. Don't worry about being, popular or getting everybody to like you or getting approval. That's not it. The thing is, get the job done, get the task done, right? What is your mission and vision? Focus on that. Don't focus on all this other stuff. Find your grit tribe. Your grit tribe are going to be the people that will respect you and respect your work. Even if you guys have differences from time to time, overall, they still respect you and they respect your work. Some of you do have it more difficult than others. You're dealing in, systems of, I think, oppression and situations that are just horrible. And it feels like there's like a rope around your neck and you still have to perform. And you know that the people aren't really for you, but you're still, cranking it out. And kudos to all of you that are in that situation. Just continue to plow through it one day at a time and find your grit tribe, those that will continue to push the vision and mission forward and push your work forward. Next, write a vision and make it plain. So it's hard to move forward if you don't know where you're going. So writing a vision and making it plain is key to showing productivity and progress through grit. What is the vision and the mission? Where are you on that vision and mission? And then move forward. I would say also hold yourself accountable by having people that can help you with this and assigning grit roles. Who's going to help with the growth mindset of the team or of the school? Who's going to be that leader? Who's going to be the resilience leader? The one that's going to make sure they can pump people up when they feel like giving up, pump students up. They feel like, throwing in the towel. Assign grit roles. Who's going to work on that self-efficacy, making people believe in themselves and having that inner confidence? And then, of course, who's going to hold everybody accountable through time management? So assigning grit roles is key. As you do that, you will continue to build a culture of grit. This has to be intentional. It's I admire my son's school because they have a theme of grit right now for the sports, and they're doing very well. They're actually going to playoffs. So I'm very proud of them and how far they've gotten. And, they continue to go back to grit because they know grit works. And one thing about it, though, is they're building a culture of grit where grit is now a part of the way of work. It's a part of the language. It's a part of the environment. It's a part of the conversations, the social constructs of things. Grit is not easy all the time. But grit, you make yourself become resilient and do something. You've got to do something. You have to move forward. With grit, there is movement. Without grit, things grow stagnant. It's like a lake that just have stagnant water sitting there. Like we just got hit with Milton. There's like all these lakes and all these, flooded areas, and the water is just sitting there stagnant. There's no life in it. It's just yuck, right? And that's what happens to life. If we don't continue to move forward through grit, you can exist, but it just becomes really dead, stagnant, stale, moldy, and people just, people become turned off by it. So in order to avoid becoming like that or having your vision become like that, you've got to move forward. You look at some businesses and you look like, wow, I bet you that business was thriving 20 years ago, but now it's just like on the side of the road and it's abandoned, right? And something happened. I don't know, none of my business, but somewhere the grit fell apart, whether it was economic reasons, because that is another thing that can block grit, can be financial hardships, especially things that you don't see coming your way. That can block grit as well. But overall, our goal is to make sure we're continuing to have a forward movement, that we're keeping a good pace, and that we have a team with us. Whenever you're doing this grit work, sometimes you do want to make sure that you're bringing someone with you, so that it doesn't look like you're just trying to like overturn an entire empire by yourself. That's not the goal. The goal is to fulfill the vision and mission, and to take a team with you to maybe enhance the level of innovation and enhance, just the quality of work and the quality of achievement that's happening, whether it's a school district or an organization in particular. So with that said, we're talking about grit. So I want to now talk with you and show you a clip from a little kid that talks about grit. I thought he was just really cute. So I wanted to bring him on as he talks to us about this.
I think grit is being tough. You have to work harder and you can't just give up the first time something doesn't work out. Just like what happens in the real world, not everything really works out your first try. I came across a video and some pictures of a portable charger, and then I decided maybe I can make one on my own.
So this kid is talking about making a portable charger, and he's using grit to help him.
I made a sketch in the beginning. At first, I didn't have a 9-volt connector, so I had to make one out of cardboard and screws. I didn't even have electrical tape to do it, so to attach the connector to the 9-volt, I had to use Scotch tape around the connections. Half the time it wouldn't power on, or there'd be some kind of wiring problem, like not like hazardous problems, but it didn't really work out. So, and then I moved on to the cardboard, and I made the connections out of aluminum foil. The charged battery would hit the positive side would hit the negative side of the USB. It didn't catch on fire or anything. After the cardboard, when I got a new container, I actually ruined it when I was trying to make the USB hole. And it snapped both of my drill bits into the wood. Just bent the whole box, and it couldn't close, and it looked really bad. It had some.
I just think it's very impressive how young this man is talking about this. He's definitely an engineer of some sort.
Sharp ends. I decided to just use like wire cutters to just cut the whole thing. But that just totally broke the box too, and been through about 3 boxes. By the time I got to the final box, I was working for about a month and a half.
Wow. Did you hear him? He said that he was working for a month and a half on building that box so that he can make a portable charger. And he's definitely grades K5 at St. Vite, and he has more grit than many of people, including myself, probably. So I think that's great that young man has accomplished that at such a young age. And I think that's why, too, we need to always keep the ceiling open when it comes down to students that are more intellectually shown themselves to be more advanced, gifted, or you just, those child prodigies, because you never know who you are teaching. So with that said, I thought it was great as he was able to talk about grit. And so with that said, now I want to, have us to actually look at some research here of what it's talking about with grit and what grit looks like. And when it comes down to like building a culture of grit and all that good stuff. So let's look at it from, I guess, leadership perspective. I always, talk to teachers, but I'm going to talk about this. So it says organizational grit. So this was in 2018. Okay, and so it says higher achievers have extraordinary stamina. Even if they're already at the top of the game, they're always striving to improve. There has to be forward movement. It says even if their work requires sacrifice, they remain in love with what they do. Even when easier or easier paths beckon, the commitment is steadfast. We all call this remarkable combination strengths grit. Remember, I told you, everyone is talking about, oh, I've got the fight in me, I've got the inner drive, and I've got that with it to itness, or whatever they call it. It's stick it to itness, right? It's all grit. And so here they're talking about research that was done at West Point, probably from Dr. Duckworth. Talks about how students, cadets will make it through training. That actually determines their better education than achievement test scores and athletic ability. Very interesting. Grit predicts the likelihood of graduating from high school and college performance in stressful jobs such as sales, right? And it talks about how in healthcare, patients have long depended on grit of an individual, of doctors and nurses. And then it talks about, let's keep going. He talks to us about drawing on decades of experience as a clinician. And then, of course, the Dr. Angela Duckworth's Foundational Studies in Grit, how it's integrated psychological research. You've got to understand what's going on in the brain. And so it talks about how in the new grit model of healthcare, exemplified in leading institutions like Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic, passion for patient well-being and perseverance in the pursuit of that goal becomes the social norms at that individual, team, or institutional level. So let's keep going. And so developing individuals through grit. And this is talking about an organizational culture of grit. We're trying to build a culture of grit. So it says, for leaders, building gritty culture begins with selecting and developing gritty individuals. And I would say do this without biases. If you really do this, if you really want to grit, you're going to have to put biases to the side so that you can get a fair slot of everyone that has the ability to do well in your organization. So it says, what should organizations look like? There are two critical components of grit, and those are passion and perseverance. And so it talks about how it comes from an intrinsic interest in your craft and also from a sense of purpose. So the conviction of your work is meaningful and it helps others. Perseverance takes on the form of resilience in the face of adversity, right? So I talk about resilience. And then the unwavering devotion to continuous improvement, right, until you finish. That's their time management. And then it's talking about now, consider what hierarchy might look like for a cardiologist. So at the bottom would be specific tasks of their short-term to-do list, such as meetings to review cases. Those are low level, right? They're means to an end. But then at the top would be increasing a patient's quality and length of life through surgery, right? So it says here, less gritty people, in contrast, have a less coherent goal hierarchies and often numerous conflicts among goals at every level. Interesting. So it says, it's important to assembling a group of gritty people does not necessarily create a gritty organization. It could yield a disorganized crowd of driven individuals, each pursuing a separate passion. That's good to know as well. So it's good to have grit, but it has to be organized. You have to make sure everybody complements each other. And I am one that, I see people that are big on, competition and, they want to be the best. They want to be the only one. And I think that is a level of, if I had to keep it real, I think, there comes a time and a place of competition, but if it's to the place where it's detrimental to others and it's harming others, I think, you should consider collaboration versus competition. I think competition can be birthed from many different things, whether that's jealousy, whether that's narcissism, whether that's childhood trauma that, you didn't get enough validation and affirmations growing up. So you want to compete and be the best. And I think that once people are content with themselves and understand what they bring to the table with talents and giftings, they don't have to compete and tear down other people in order to get in the room or have an opportunity. And I honestly think too, even if you do that and you do get in the room, you probably still won't fill the shoes like you thought you would, or you'll realize that the grass still isn't greener on the other side. But that it's best to work on yourself and become the best expert in competing within so that you can, master who you are and the gifts that you bring to this world without having to tear down other people. I think it's very interesting. The human race is, I don't see a lot. I mean, nature, yeah, you see, animals eating other animals, lions and all that stuff in the jungle. But for the most part, this is a peaceful we try to be a peaceful planet, and nature is naturally peaceful. As long as you're not like in their space, they're just like building themselves. And I think that we ought to consider that, whenever we are offering our talents and things like that, not to tear down others, and whether that's through what you say about others or what you do to others or how you try to block others and things like that. I think it should be more of focusing on ourselves and making sure we're the best person. I just think that if you are one of those people that you block others, you hurt others, you pull down others, I want you to just really try to get quiet and figure out what happened. How can you become a better version of yourself? Because if you have to pull down others, that's not the best version of you. And karma is fabulous. So, and it keeps great records. And I think that, sometimes we have to slow down enough and realize, are we operating in a good place of energy, a good place of space, mental head space, heart space, as we're doing this work and remaining gritty? If not, we need to really reconsider and draw up the plan again and figure out what do we need to do to become better, loving people. I just, my heart is always there of how we can become better people. And so, I think that we can definitely do it through grit, and it does not have to be through pulling down and things like that. Yes, you can be competitive, but I think that you can also respect those that are around you as you are also being competitive. So it talks about here, if everyone's goals aren't aligned, a culture won't be gritty, right? And the last thing we need is a toxic culture. All right, so it says, how can you hire for grit? Questionnaires are useful for research and self-reflection, right? But we don't recommend them. Except, it says instead, we recommend carefully reviewing an applicant's track record, looking for multi-year commitments and objective evidence of advancement and achievement. Okay, and that's good. And then it says gauging your grit. So to see how gritty you are, you could do a different scale. So I know Dr. Duckworth has a scale here. And then it says you can also build teams. So gritty teams, I love it. I love that. You can assign grit roles, right? So somebody's going to be over growth mindset. Someone's going to be over resilience. Someone's over self-advocacy. Someone's over time management for the team, right? Building a grit team. So it says here, in healthcare, teams are often defined by the population they serve or the site where they work. Gritty team members may have their own professional goal, but each of them embrace the team's high-level goal, right? I like that. So that's just a little bit there. And it talks about here, gritty organizations. If a gritty individuals or teams are to thrive, organizations need to develop cultures. This is important that make them in turn macrocosms of their best teams and people. So you should be able to rebrand, reduplicate that person or duplicate that person because it's working, right? But let's keep reading. So it says another danger is promoting a high level objective that people won't embrace. So, and that's why you've got to be careful when you're doing this and make sure to check the mindset and the environment. And so it says, in our experience, every gritty healthcare organization has a primary goal of putting patients first, right? So that's pretty good. So this is just a little bit to us about grit. It talks about here, crises offer special opportunities for growth, and in particular, strengthening culture. I think the greatest sign of a culture is how they deal with people during crisis, during hardships. And can you feel their heart of empathy? Can you sense that these people care? If not, then that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day, right? But long story short, we read there different ways that we as leaders, whether you're at school and the health profession, whatever, can build a culture of grit. I think it's so imperative that we do our part in building grit because we need it more than ever. People are, and I think that while you're building grit, you need to also understand how to balance grit. I think definitely having team roles and having grit weeks, which I've spoken to you guys about before. And if you're needing some support or you want some resources on that, just reach out to me. I've got some stuff for you. You can create different things for grit weeks and you can reward people on the grit. I actually have a grit certificate where you can award people for the grit and the grittiness that they have established on the job or at the school. So reach out to me for that. I could give that template to you. So with that said, this was wonderful as we're talking about building a culture of grit. I think that, there's so much here. Again, remembering the growth mindset Monday, resilience Tuesday, self-efficacy Wednesday, time management Thursdays, and then your gritty Fridays where you celebrate. And then of course you can reflect and recharge on the weekends. Remembering the grit weeks, and then also remembering that it's all about having grit and perseverance no matter what. So with that said, I want to challenge you guys to do your part on building a culture of grit. And now we're going to wrap it up. So thanks so much again for joining me on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White. Again, this podcast is featured on X Factor EDU Network, hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph, and you can find it on Spotify. Also, I want to remind you to check out my website. Lots of good things on there. There's a lot on there, I know, but I'm super excited because I'm always adding new content and new things for you guys. I just want to keep it fresh. But because I've been doing this for so long, you're going to find a million blogs, a million videos just to show you. I'm thankful. I've been on over hundreds of stages, and I can't wait to continue to bless you guys with this knowledge on grit. So thank you to those again that have offered me the opportunity to join you. Again, I've got some upcoming conferences coming up. We've got FAMT coming up. We've got South Carolina's conference coming up. Thank you, South Carolina, for allowing me to be a keynote. I don't take that lightly at all. NABC, thank you, NABC representatives. What a phenomenal conference. I'm honored to even be in the room. And then, of course, Making Math Moments virtual conference. I'm super excited about that and joining the rock stars. What a lineup at that conference, by the way. Joining all those rock stars at that conference. Check out the Grassroots mini workshop. Whenever you get a chance, go to grassrootsworkshops.com and check that out. Please also provide feedback once you do it. And if you're wanting more resources, just reach directly out to me. I can see what I can do to support you. Also, please follow me on social media. Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indy Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indy238. YouTube is India White 123. And TikTok is Dr. India White. I also wanted to let you guys know that I have available on my website, and for you guys, if you ask me, grit sheets, and on these grit sheets is all of these different grit resources that will help you with developing grit. You'll get a discounted code for getting the grit workbook. You'll also get access to free grit Kahoot games. There's also some grit games that are separate from Kahoot that you can print out and work with your class. There's also grit award certificates that you can give to your students or to your faculty and beyond. There's other grit resources on there. So if you're wanting a grit sheet and it has just so many resources of grit, please let me know and I will get that to you. With that said, guys, it has been fabulous. Thank you so much again for joining me on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. And until next time, stay gritty. See ya.